Check out the ink on that old timer. One of them sneered, his voice a low rumble of arrogance. Bet he got that in a back-alley tattoo parlor in Saigon after a 2-week bender. The man they were mocking didn't flinch. He just stared into his lukewarm coffee, his hands, gnarled with age, wrapped around the cheap ceramic mug. He was a ghost in this bustling military base café, a relic of a forgotten war amidst the vibrant, lethal energy of the new generation. They saw a stooped old man in a faded flannel shirt. They didn't see the steel that still resided in his spine. If you believe true heroes deserve our unwavering respect, type honor in the comments below. His name was Samuel Vance, and for the last 20 years, he'd worked as a groundskeeper on this very base. He trimmed the hedges that lined the paths these young lions walked, swept the leaves from the parade ground where they trained, and remained utterly invisible to them. His life was a quiet routine of solitude and memory, a stark contrast to the thunderous past he never spoke of. The faded tattoo on his forearm, a blurry image of a serpent coiled around a downward-pointing dagger, was the only visible remnant of that life, a life these modern warriors couldn't even begin to comprehend. Every morning, he would sit in the same booth at the base's small café, nursing a single black coffee for an hour, watching the world he once commanded from the shadows now pass him by without a second glance. The wrinkles on his face were a roadmap of hardship, his eyes holding a distant look that some mistook for vacancy, but was in fact a screen playing memories on a loop. The bell over the door chimed, announcing an arrival that shifted the café's atmosphere from calm to charged. 3 men, built like Abrams tanks and moving with the predatory grace of apex predators, strode in. They wore tactical gear, their uniforms crisp, their faces set with the casual confidence of those who knew they were the best. Delta Force, the tip of the spear. They ordered their coffees with clipped, efficient words and took a table near Samuel, their boisterous conversation filling the small space. They were decompressing from a grueling 2-week training exercise, their adrenaline still humming beneath the surface. It was Sergeant Rourke, the clear leader of the trio, a man whose jaw seemed permanently set in a look of disdain for anything he deemed lesser, who first noticed Samuel's arm as the old man reached for a sugar packet. Rourke nudged his subordinate, a younger operator named Miller. "Hey Miller, look at that." A genuine antique Miller, eager to please his team leader, craned his neck. "Wow, that thing's seen better days. What is it even? A worm wrestling a butter knife." The third operator, a quiet sniper named Chen, chuckled softly into his coffee, though he had the decency to keep his eyes down. Rourke, however, had no such reservations. He leaned back, his chair groaning under his weight, and addressed Samuel directly, his tone dripping with condescending amusement. "Hey Pop, where'd you get the war art? Korea? Vietnam?" Samuel slowly looked up from his cup, his pale blue eyes holding a depth of experience that the young men mistook for senility. They were eyes that had seen jungles so dense the sun never touched the ground, eyes that had watched friends draw their last breaths. "It was a long time ago," he said, his voice raspy with disuse, carrying the quiet authority of a man who had nothing left to prove. His simple, non-confrontational answer only emboldened them. Rourke saw it as weakness, the passivity of a man whose time was long past, a relic to be toyed with before it was put back on the shelf to gather more dust. "A long time ago," Rourke mimicked in a frail, quavering voice, earning a loud snort from Miller. "Let me guess. You were a cook, right? Or maybe a supply clerk. Got that tattoo to impress a girl back home. Tell her you were some kind of secret agent." He leaned forward, propping his muscular forearms on the table, his own intricate and meaningful tattoos on full display. "You know, we have tattoos too, old man. But ours mean something. They're earned in blood and fire. They tell a story of missions you couldn't dream of." Samuel didn't rise to the bait. He simply took a slow sip of his coffee, his silence an infuriating, impenetrable shield against their arrogance. The barista, a young woman named Chloe, watched with a worried expression from behind the counter, wringing a cloth in her hands. She felt a protective instinct for the quiet old man who came in every day, but the sheer physical presence and intimidating aura of the operators kept her rooted to the spot. This was their world, their base. Who was she to challenge them over their teasing of a harmless old man? Samuel's lack of reaction seemed to frustrate Rourke more than any angry retort could have. He wanted a reaction, a confirmation of his own superiority, and the old man's placid dignity was denying him that satisfaction. "What's that little squiggle underneath it?" Miller asked, squinting with genuine curiosity now, breaking the tense silence. "Looks like letters, but they're all blurred together." Samuel's hand, which had been resting calmly on the table, instinctively tightened on his cup. For the first time, a flicker of raw emotion crossed his placid features. A deep, ancient pain that momentarily clouded his pale eyes. He subconsciously tried to pull his sleeve down, a small, involuntary gesture of concealment that Rourke immediately caught with a predator's instinct. "Oh, we've hit a nerve," Rourke declared triumphantly, a cruel smirk spreading across his face. "What is it, Pop?" "The name of the girl who broke your heart when you got back from your big tour in the motor pool." He reached out, his hand moving with swift confidence to grab Samuel's arm. "Let's get a better look at this piece of history." But before his fingers could touch the worn fabric of the old man's sleeve, another shadow fell over their table. The air grew still. The boisterous energy of the operators evaporated, replaced by a sudden, rigid tension that was as thick as jungle humidity. "Is there a problem here, Sergeant?" The voice was quiet, yet it carried the weight of absolute command. It cut through the cafe's chatter like a surgeon's scalpel, and every person in the small establishment froze. Rourke and his men snapped to attention so fast their chairs scraped violently against the linoleum floor. Standing beside them was a man whose presence filled the room and demanded respect. General Marcus Thorne, the base commander, a living legend with 4 stars on his collar and a gaze that could peel paint from a bulkhead. His uniform was immaculate, his posture ramrod straight. He wasn't looking at the operators. His eyes, sharp and piercing, were fixed on Samuel. Rourke's face had gone the color of ash. "No, sir. No problem at all, General," he stammered, his voice suddenly 2 octaves higher. "We were just admiring the gentleman's tattoo, sir." The General's gaze didn't waver from Samuel for a long moment, and a strange, unreadable emotion played on his face. He finally shifted his attention to Rourke. "Were you now?" he said softly, the words laced with ice. He took a step closer, his own highly polished boots stopping inches from Rourke's, his eyes zeroing in on the faded ink on Samuel's forearm. General Thorne's entire demeanor shifted. The hard lines around his eyes eased into something akin to profound reverence. He ignored the 3 statues of elite soldiers standing beside him and spoke directly to the old groundskeeper, his voice now thick with an emotion he rarely showed. "I haven't seen that mark in 30 years, Sam," he said, the name spoken with a familiarity that shocked the room. He then turned to look at the 3 operators, his eyes blazing with a cold fire that made them physically shrink. "You were admiring it? Sergeant, you have no idea what you're looking at." He gestured with a crisp, commanding motion to Samuel's arm. "You see a faded tattoo. I see the insignia of MACV-SOG, Command and Control North, a ghost unit that ran cross-border operations into Laos and Cambodia, a unit whose existence was denied by the U.S. government for decades, a unit with a casualty rate that would make even you 3 hardened warriors sick to your stomach." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink into the petrified operators. "This man, this old-timer you were amusing yourselves with, is Master Sgt. Samuel Vance. He was the 1-0, the team leader of Spike Team ASP. In the field, they had another name for him. They called him the Phantom." The operators' jaws hung slack. The names, the acronyms MACV-SOG, Spike Team, they were the stuff of special operations legend, stories whispered in hushed, reverent tones during the most brutal phases of their own training. "The letters you can't read underneath?" General Thorne continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, filled with a raw, painful respect that commanded the attention of every person in the café. "They're not letters. They are the initials of the 5 men from his team who didn't come home from their last mission. A mission deep behind enemy lines to rescue a downed F-4 pilot. A mission that went sideways from the first minute. The general's eyes locked onto Rourke's, and the younger man felt as if his soul were being stripped bare. Master Sgt. Vance held off an entire NVA battalion for 72 hours, virtually alone, so that the rescue chopper could get that pilot out. He took 3 bullets and enough shrapnel to build a new grenade, but he never left his post. He never gave an inch. He saved that pilot. The general slowly, deliberately, began to unbutton the cuff of his own crisp, perfectly pressed uniform shirt. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a much newer, but identical, tattoo of a serpent coiled around a downward-pointing dagger on his own powerful forearm. It was stark and black against his skin. "You want to see a tattoo that was earned, Sergeant?" he asked, his voice dangerously low and vibrating with intensity. The 3 operators stared, their faces a mask of disbelief, horror, and profound, soul-crushing shame. The general tapped his own tattoo. "I got this the day I made Brigadier General. To honor the man who made it possible for me to have a career, to have a life." He looked from his own arm back to the stunned operators, his final words landing like hammer blows. "I was the pilot." The silence in the café was absolute, a crushing weight that seemed to suck the very air from the room. Chloe, the barista, had tears streaming down her face, her hand covering her mouth in a silent sob. Rourke looked as if he'd been physically struck, his entire world reordered in a single, devastating moment. His arrogance, his swagger, his sense of superiority. It had all shattered into a million pieces, replaced by a deep, gut-wrenching shame that burned in his stomach. He took a hesitant step forward, his eyes fixed on Samuel, the man he had ridiculed just moments before. "Sir," he choked out, his voice cracking with emotion. "Master Sergeant. I have no words. I am so sorry. My behavior was inexcusable." It was dishonorable. Miller and Chan stood behind him, their heads bowed, their shame just as palpable. Samuel finally looked up at them, his pale blue eyes holding not anger, but a profound, weary sadness that was somehow more damning than any rage could have been. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was an acceptance of their apology. It was a start. General Thorne put a firm, supportive hand on Samuel's shoulder. "Come on, Sam. Let's get you a real cup of coffee over at the O Club." My treat. As they stood to leave, the general turned back to the 3 frozen operators. "You will be in my office at 0600 tomorrow. All of you. And you will be there every morning for the next month. You're going to learn a lesson about history, humility, and the giants on whose shoulders you stand." Dismissed, the 3 men scattered like dust in the wind, their swagger gone, replaced by the heavy weight of their newfound humility. Later that week, a small, informal ceremony was held on the parade ground. General Thorne posthumously awarded medals to the 5 men whose initials were tattooed on Samuel Vance's arm, with Samuel accepting on their family's behalf. Sergeant Rourke and his team stood in the front row, their uniforms immaculate, their expressions somber and deeply respectful. They had, in the preceding days, spent hours in the base library, reading every declassified file they could find on MACV-SOG. They learned that a quiet life doesn't mean an empty one, and that the unassuming groundskeeper they had mocked was more of a warrior than they could ever hope to be. This story shows us that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear faded flannel and carry the weight of a silent history. They are the quiet janitors, the humble gardeners, the silent neighbors whose stories are etched not just in ink on their skin, but into the very fabric of our freedom. We must never forget that the peaceful world we enjoy was built on the sacrifices of giants who now walk quietly among us. The next time you see an elderly veteran, don't just see their age. See their history. See their sacrifice. The lingering image is of Sergeant Rourke weeks later, sitting in that same cafe, not with his team, but with another elderly veteran, a forgotten hero from the Korean War. He wasn't talking. He was listening, his full attention on the old man's story, a cup of coffee he had bought and paid for sitting in front of them both. He had learned his lesson. If you believe that every generation has a duty to honor the heroes who came before, Subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of the true meaning of respect and sacrifice.